Flair is talking about a part of his life most fans know nothing about. How decades of so-called social drinking ended.
Ric Flair is talking about a part of his life most fans never knew existed. A side that was hidden behind bright lights, roaring crowds, and the legendary persona of the Nature Boy. Decades of so-called social drinking, nights that seemed harmless at the time, quietly took a toll on his body. Last summer, that hidden life came crashing forward in a health scare so severe that it nearly ended everything. For someone who had always been larger than life, who survived everything the wrestling world threw at him, the thought of mortality was once unimaginable. Flair walked into arenas with unmatched confidence, his charisma electrifying every crowd. Fans cheered every strut, every robe, every woo. But behind that glittering persona, the man who refused to quit was quietly fighting battles the public could never see. What happened behind the curtain had remained a mystery for years. Rumors, whispers, and questions filled the air. What was Ric Flair hiding from the world? When he finally spoke out, the truth left fans shaken. The very same man who had survived countless battles in the ring, who had earned a place in wrestling history as a symbol of resilience, faced a battle that no fame, wealth, or bravado could protect him from. This is the story of Ric Flair, the man who refused to quit, whose journey through life, loss, and survival has become the stuff of legend. Ric Flair was never just a wrestler. He was a spectacle, a phenomenon, a character so magnetic that even decades later, fans remember every strut, every robe, every triumphant woo. He entered arenas like a storm, the very air seeming to shift as he walked. Flair's presence demanded attention. His personality was amplified by his flamboyant style, platinum blonde hair, shimmering robes, and a voice that could dominate an arena. But Flair's greatness wasn't limited to style or charisma. His in-ring abilities elevated him above his peers. Wrestling, for him, was both sport and art. He understood the rhythm of a match, knew how to build suspense, and turned every move into a story. The figure-4 leg lock, one of his signature techniques, wasn't just a hold, it was a tool for drama. When Flair applied it, fans leaned forward, hearts racing, waiting to see if the opponent would withstand the agony or finally submit. Over his decades-long career, Flair accumulated 16 officially recognized world championships, performing in legendary promotions like the NWA, WCW, and WWE. That record alone is remarkable. But it was his ability to consistently deliver high-quality matches that solidified his reputation as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Fans didn't just watch Ric Flair, they experienced him. He was a character, a performer, and a competitor rolled into one, and the world couldn't look away. Yet behind the larger-than-life persona, scars were forming. The life of a legend, full of energy and performance, came with costs few could imagine. Fame and glory were accompanied by hidden battles that would eventually push Flair to the brink, in ways that no wrestling match ever could. Ric Flair's journey began in 1972, when a young Richard Morgan Flair first entered the wrestling world under the guidance of legendary trainer Verne Gagne. At the time, few could predict that this rookie, with platinum hair and an unshakable confidence, would go on to shape wrestling history. Flair didn't merely participate, he transformed wrestling into a spectacle. His entrance alone was mesmerizing. The flashing robes, the booming woo, and the aura of invincibility made fans fall in love instantly. But Flair wasn't just showmanship. He possessed the technical skill to back up the theatrics. He could control the pace of a match, anticipate his opponent's moves, and create moments that left audiences on the edge of their seats. Flair's figure-4 leg lock became legendary, a symbol of suspense and strategy that demonstrated his deep understanding of wrestling psychology. In the early years, Flair's determination and charisma set him apart. He worked tirelessly, learning the nuances of the sport while building a persona that combined elegance, flamboyance, and dominance. By the late 1970s, he had already begun to capture championship titles, proving that his talent in the ring matched his magnetism outside it. Fans didn't just admire him, they idolized him. Flair's early success wasn't a fluke. It was the result of hard work, vision, and an instinctive understanding of what made wrestling entertaining. His rise also reflected his ability to adapt and overcome. Every match was a lesson, every opponent a teacher, and while his robes, hair, and swagger drew attention, it was his mastery of wrestling that ensured he remained unforgettable. By the time he fully established himself, Flair wasn't just a wrestler, he was an institution, a symbol of excellence and resilience in a sport defined by risk, drama, and spectacle. Flair's legendary career was not without its perils. In 1975, a plane crash in North Carolina left him with a broken back in 3 places. Doctors told him that his career was over before it had even reached its peak. The prognosis was grim, but Flair refused to accept defeat. Within 8 months, he returned to the ring, defying expectations and proving that the limits of the human body could be challenged by sheer willpower. Even outside of physical injuries, Flair faced the emotional weight of wrestling life. Matches took a toll on his body, and the relentless schedule of touring and performing left little room for rest. Yet, through every injury and setback, Flair's charisma and skill kept him at the top of the sport. His 2008 farewell match at WrestleMania 24 against Shawn Michaels remains one of the most emotional moments in professional wrestling history. Fans witnessed not only the athleticism and showmanship, but also the vulnerability and humanity of a man who had given everything to his craft. Despite retiring from full-time competition, Flair's passion for the sport never waned. In 2022, at the age of 73, he laced up his boots for one final contest. It was a reminder that his connection to wrestling was deeper than fame or money. It was an essential part of who he was. Behind the glittering robes and arena lights, Ric Flair faced heartbreak that fame could never shield him from. In 2013, his youngest son, Reed, died from a heroin overdose. The tragedy left a wound that never fully healed, and Flair openly admitted that the grief stayed with him. The loss highlighted the complexity of his life. In the ring, he was invincible, a master of resilience. Outside it, he confronted pain and vulnerability that no amount of fame could erase. It was a reminder that even the strongest figures can be shaken by personal loss, and that resilience is often measured not by victories in the ring, but by the courage to continue living despite heartbreak. In August 2017, the cheers of the arena were replaced by the urgent beeping of hospital monitors. Ric Flair suffered from severe abdominal pain and nausea, which escalated into a catastrophic health crisis. Doctors diagnosed him with a bowel obstruction, a blockage that triggered multiple organ failures. His kidneys failed, his liver struggled, and his heart became unstable when sepsis set in. Surgeons removed part of his intestines, and a pacemaker was implanted to stabilize his rhythm. Flair was placed in a medically induced coma for over 10 days. Doctors gave him only a 20% chance of survival. When he finally regained consciousness, he admitted, "I didn't think I was going to make it. I was given last rites." The ordeal was a harsh reckoning. His decades of heavy drinking had left his body vulnerable, and he confronted mortality in a way that fame could never shield him from. Recovery was grueling. Flair spent over 30 days in intensive care, lost significant weight, and required physical therapy to regain basic mobility. Yet even in the darkest moments, support from his partner, Wendy Barlow, provided a lifeline. She stayed by his bedside, sleeping in a chair for 40 consecutive nights. Emerging from the hospital, Ric Flair was no longer just the flashy, invincible figure of the past. He embraced sobriety, reflected on his legacy, and confronted the emotional toll of his near-death experience. In interviews, he spoke candidly about depression and post-traumatic stress, acknowledging fear in ways fans had never heard. He shifted focus toward family, particularly mentoring his daughter, Charlotte Flair, and nurturing young wrestlers. The man once defined by bravado and wealth now embraced humility, reflection, and love. Ric Flair's story is not only about wrestling triumphs, but about survival, resilience, and humanity. From his rise to fame to his near-death experience, he embodies the idea that even legends face vulnerability. Fans remember him not just for his flashy robes and championship titles, but for his courage, his ability to rise after tragedy, and his devotion to family. His legacy extends beyond the ring. Flair reminds us that life's battles are often unseen. That survival requires not just talent, but the support of those who love us, and that the journey of self-discovery continues, even after the cheers fade. After Ric Flair's near-death experience in 2017, fans and media alike were desperate for reassurance. They wanted to believe that the Nature Boy had finally defeated the shadows of his past. At first, changes were subtle. Appearances seemed slightly different. His once booming voice appeared slower, his movements a little less explosive. At a 2018 Comic-Con, fans who had waited hours to meet him noticed tremors in his hands and slight slurring in his speech. For a man defined by energy and charisma, these signs were impossible to ignore. Questions circulated quietly. Was this the toll of decades in the ring? The after effects of his drinking and lifestyle? Or was something more serious unfolding? By 2020, public concern intensified. Flair canceled a major WrestleMania weekend appearance at the last minute. We cited health concerns, offering little detail. The vagueness fueled speculation. Fans and commentators debated whether the legendary performer would continue to survive or if this chapter of his life was drawing to a quiet close. Through whispers and rumors, one thing became clear. The man who once seemed untouchable was now undeniably human. Fans who had idolized Flair for decades now grappled with a new reality. Social media buzzed with stories of admiration and concern. Forums and fan pages speculated on his health, his sobriety, and even his mental state. Some fans mourned the old Rick, the invincible Nature Boy, while others celebrated his courage to face mortality and vulnerability openly. His honesty about depression, post-traumatic stress, and sobriety reshaped his image. Flair became more than a wrestler. He became a symbol of resilience beyond the ring. Fans recognized that his battles were not scripted or staged. They were real. And in a world that often expects legends to remain flawless, this honesty deepened the connection between Ric Flair and those who had followed him for decades. One of the most transformative aspects of Flair's later years was his focus on family and mentorship. Charlotte Flair, already a prominent WWE superstar, became a central figure in his life. Rick worked to make amends for past mistakes as a father, guiding her and offering wisdom drawn from decades in wrestling and life. His mentoring extended beyond family. Younger wrestlers, looking up to a man who had survived every imaginable challenge, found a teacher in Ric Flair. He shared lessons not just about technique, but about resilience, professionalism, and navigating the highs and lows of a public life. This period highlighted a softer, more reflective side of the Nature Boy, revealing the humanity that fans had never fully seen behind the sequins and spotlight. Facing mortality forced Flair to reconsider his life and priorities. He began speaking openly about gratitude, humility, and the fleeting nature of time. The arenas and applause were no longer the sole markers of success. What mattered now were family, relationships, and leaving a positive legacy. In interviews, he often reflected on lessons learned from near-death experiences, loss, and years of personal indulgence. Flair acknowledged the mistakes of his past, particularly his struggles with alcohol, and emphasized the importance of accountability and change. His words resonated with fans, especially those who had followed him for decades, illustrating that even icons could grow, evolve, and embrace vulnerability. Even after recovering from his 2017 health scare, Ric Flair's body continued to remind him of past excesses. Regular doctor visits became part of his life. Kidney function, liver health, and cardiovascular monitoring were constant reminders of a lifestyle that had pushed him to the brink. Fans saw a man who had once seemed unstoppable, now needing support for even simple tasks. Yet Flair approached these challenges with honesty, often discussing them in interviews. His openness inspired conversations about health awareness, addiction recovery, and the importance of lifestyle changes, demonstrating that even legends must face the consequences of their choices. Ric Flair's public appearances after his health scare were a mixture of awe, nostalgia, and concern. Each interview and public appearance reminded fans of the man behind the legend. While once his entrances were marked by explosive energy, now his presence reflected a quieter charisma, tempered by experience and reflection. At fan conventions, charity events, and televised interviews, Flair shared stories of triumph and survival. His candor about sobriety, mental health, and the struggles of aging in the spotlight gave fans a deeper appreciation of the human behind the persona. These appearances reinforced the duality of his life: the dazzling nature boy and the resilient, reflective man who had faced mortality head-on. In his later years, Flair increasingly focused on giving back, whether mentoring young wrestlers, supporting health and addiction awareness campaigns, or contributing to charitable causes. He leveraged his fame to create positive impact. Fans and colleagues alike noted that this period of philanthropy showcased a side of Flair rarely seen in his wrestling days. Beyond the sequins, titles, and theatrics, he sought to make a difference, ensuring his legacy would be measured not only in championships, but in the lives he touched. Ric Flair's brush with death led him to confront mortality in a profound way. He spoke candidly about fear, not of death itself, but of missing out on life, especially the milestones of his grandchildren and loved ones. This introspection transformed the way fans viewed him. The man who had once embodied overconfidence and invincibility now expressed vulnerability, teaching that true strength includes facing one's fears and embracing the reality of life's fragility. This reflection added depth to the legend, transforming public perception and highlighting the human resilience behind the myth. Ric Flair's life story is a study in contrasts: flamboyant yet reflective, invincible yet vulnerable, celebrated yet deeply human. His journey from a young wrestler in 1972 to a global icon spans decades of triumph, tragedy, and survival. Through injuries, personal loss, near-death experiences, and public scrutiny, Flair's resilience and honesty have made him a symbol not only of professional excellence, but of human courage. Fans remember him for his energy, charisma, and championships, but his true legacy is far richer: survival, mentorship, and the courage to confront life's hardest truths. Facing mortality gave Ric Flair a new perspective on life. Beyond the championships and accolades, he began to reflect on what truly mattered: family, integrity, and the fleeting nature of time. In interviews, he often emphasized gratitude, sharing how surviving a near-death experience transformed his outlook. Flair's reflections were not just about survival, they were about the meaning of resilience. He spoke about accepting limitations, making peace with past mistakes, and embracing vulnerability. This philosophical turn offered fans an unprecedented glimpse into the mind of a man once defined by bravado, showing that even the greatest icons must wrestle with their humanity. In interviews following his health struggles, Flair became candid about his fears, regrets, and triumphs. He recounted nights of heavy drinking, decades of physical punishment, and the toll fame took on his personal life. These statements revealed a man who had learned to confront truths he once avoided. Fans and media reacted strongly. His honesty broke the typical celebrity mold of invulnerability, creating conversations around wellness, addiction recovery, and mental health. Flair's voice resonated not just with wrestling enthusiasts, but with anyone who had faced adversity, proving that his influence extended far beyond the ring. Even in his later years, Flair maintained deep connections with his fans. Social media, conventions, and public appearances allowed him to interact personally, sharing stories and wisdom. Fans often remarked that meeting him after his health ordeal was transformative. Seeing a man who survived almost insurmountable challenges left a lasting impression. These interactions strengthened his legacy. Flair was no longer just an entertainer. He became a living symbol of resilience, survival, and authenticity. Fans connected to the human story, not just the myth, and this made admiration for him deeper and more personal than ever before. Ric Flair's influence extends beyond wrestling. His signature woo, of flashy robes and larger-than-life persona infiltrated pop culture, appearing in music, movies, television, and sports commentary. Flair became a reference point for charisma, confidence, and spectacle. In wrestling, his style shaped generations of performers. The technical mastery he displayed, combined with showmanship, created a blueprint for what it meant to be both a competitor and entertainer. His impact is measured not only in championships, but in the countless wrestlers who cite him as an inspiration and the global audience that adopted him as a cultural icon. Throughout his life, Flair grappled with the tension between celebrity and humanity. In his prime, the nature boy persona projected invincibility and excess. Behind the curtain, however, the man faced mortality, grief, and vulnerability. This duality is what made his story compelling. Fans often forgot that legends are human, susceptible to heartbreak, illness, and loss. Flair's openness about health struggles, personal regrets, and reflections on life created a bridge between his public and private selves. He became an example of how fame does not shield one from life's hardships, but how confronting those hardships can redefine legacy. Even after surviving life-threatening health crises, Flair confronted the inevitable challenges of aging. Once known for explosive energy and boundless stamina, he now faced tremors, slower reflexes, and the fatigue that comes with decades of a physically demanding career. Yet, Flair approached these limitations with honesty and humor. In interviews, he reflected on the lessons aging had taught him: patience, acceptance, and the importance of cherishing each moment. He continued to inspire fans, showing that even when the body weakens, the spirit can remain resilient and vibrant. Mentorship became a defining focus in Flair's later years. Beyond his daughter Charlotte Flair, he reached out to young wrestlers, sharing technical skills, ring psychology, and life advice. Flair emphasized resilience and professionalism, teaching newcomers that true greatness is built both in performance and character. His mentorship created a ripple effect, influencing a new generation of wrestlers and ensuring that his legacy extended beyond his personal achievements in the ring. Media coverage of Flair's later years highlighted both admiration and concern. Outlets documented his health journey, family struggles, and professional contributions. Analysts praised his candor, often noting that few celebrities publicly acknowledge vulnerability with such authenticity. Public reflection elevated Flair's image. He became not just a wrestling legend, but a case study in human resilience, accountability, and transformation, a man who navigated fame, tragedy, and mortality with courage. Ric Flair transcended wrestling to become a cultural symbol. His style, catchphrases, and charisma influenced music, television, sports, and fashion. Beyond entertainment, he embodied the archetype of flamboyance mixed with mastery, showing that dedication and performance could create icons recognized worldwide. His influence persists in memes, pop culture references, and the countless wrestlers who emulate his persona. Flair's life is a lesson in creating a lasting impact, not only through titles or championships, but through presence, character, and authenticity. Even in reflection, Flair sought to actively shape his legacy. He engaged in charity work, wrestling documentaries, and mentorship programs. By sharing his story of triumph, loss, and survival, he inspired both fans and future wrestlers. Flair's focus shifted from personal fame to enduring influence, ensuring that his lessons, both professional and personal, would continue to resonate. His legacy became as much about wisdom and guidance as it was about championships and accolades. Ric Flair's near-death experiences forced him to reflect deeply on mortality. He often spoke about how facing death reshaped his priorities. Fame, wealth, and accolades became secondary to time with family, meaningful connections, and health. He admitted that for years, he had ignored the toll of alcohol, stress, and physical punishment, believing himself untouchable. Confronting mortality taught him humility and introspection. Flair's reflections encouraged fans to consider their own choices and reminded them that even legends are not immune to life's fragility. Family became the cornerstone of Flair's later years. His relationship with his daughter Charlotte Flair, as well as other children and grandchildren, deepened after his health scare. He prioritized spending quality time, mentoring, and creating memories that would last beyond the ring. His partner Wendy Barlow's unwavering support during his coma and recovery highlighted the importance of love and companionship. Flair often expressed that it was love, not fame, that ultimately saved him and gave his survival a deeper meaning. Even outside the wrestling world, Flair became a symbol of resilience. Fans were inspired by his survival, his honesty about struggles with alcohol and health, and his ability to rebuild his life. Young wrestlers looked up to him not just for his technical skills, but for his approach to adversity, mentorship, and perseverance. His story became a roadmap for facing life's challenges with courage, dedication, and humility. Flair's career achievements were monumental. 16 officially recognized world championships, multiple Hall of Fame inductions, and countless accolades cemented his status as one of wrestling's greatest. However, his later honors reflected more than in-ring performance. Media outlets and industry insiders celebrated him for resilience, mentorship, and contributions to wrestling culture. These recognitions solidified his dual legacy, a legendary performer and a living testament to survival and personal growth. Ric Flair's legacy is multidimensional. He is remembered for flamboyant robes, legendary catchphrases, and athletic excellence, but also for resilience, honesty, and humanity. His story is a lesson that life's battles extend beyond the spotlight. Fame cannot shield anyone from heartbreak, health struggles, or the passage of time. Flair's ability to confront these challenges, mentor others, and embrace reflection elevated him from icon to role model. Fans, family, and wrestlers alike remember him as both the nature boy and the man who survived nearly everything life could throw at him. A figure whose life story continues to inspire and resonate across generations.